Thank you guys who ran the video stream. For those of you who are watching online, thanks for being back with us for our last session. Please, before you leave today, I know Greg will be eager to get a chance to talk to you out by the book table. I am, after his last session, going to kind of escort him back there because if not, it'll be difficult for him to talk to everybody, and by the time he gets out there, everybody will be gone. And so when he's done, I'll come and make a final announcement, and then you could talk to him. If you'll let us get him back to the book table, that would be great. But please check out his resources. Buy at least 100 copies for your closest friends. Is that fair? But we're so thankful for you investing in our students today. So let's thank Greg one more time as he comes to share our last.
No? Oh, there we go. Somebody's asleep at the switch. All right. So here's where we're going, where we come and where we're headed, okay? I'm trying to persuade you to look at the prospect or the project we have called evangelism. I don't like that word so much anymore. It's a biblical word, but I'd rather use a different biblical word, which is being an ambassador for Christ, because it conveys more of a sense of genial diplomacy, and I think that's what we should be representing. And in 2 Corinthians 5:20, we have Paul talking about him and, I think by application, Christians being ambassadors for Christ, ministers of reconciliation, okay? So I want you to think of yourself as an ambassador. I don't want you to worry about kind of going for the gold, so to speak, or swinging for the fences there, to mix my metaphors. I want you to think not of harvesting, but of gardening, okay? And my conviction is that if I can give you tools to garden, that is to put a stone in someone's shoe, to get people thinking that the more gardeners we have, gardening well, will result in a greater harvest, okay? And once the fruit is ripe, the harvesting is relatively easy. The hard part is getting a lot of gardeners into play, saying intelligent things, asking intelligent questions in a gracious manner that can help move people forward closer to conviction about Christ. And when they have that conviction that the Holy Spirit gives, then it's a fait accompli. It's a done deal. They're going to put their faith in Christ as a result of all that's happened up to that time and as a result of what you have done in their lives, the gardening part. Now, with that in mind, I've begun to offer you a game plan to accomplish that task, to garden as a good ambassador, to attempt to put a stone in someone's shoe. And I call this tactic the Columbo tactic because after Lieutenant Columbo, we are going to use questions to maneuver in conversations. I mentioned that we have 3 steps of the game plan. I've only talked about one. The first step was what? What is the first thing we're going to do when we enter into a conversation with someone else that we think might have a spiritual consequence? We're going to do one thing and one thing only, and that is what? Gather information. We're just going to get the lay of the land. That's all we want to do. We don't know where we're going to go with this because we don't know what we're going to find out. It may be a Christian that we're talking to. Maybe a non-Christian who's not open to discussing something. Maybe a non-Christian who's got lots of questions that you can't answer. It may be a non-Christian that's really hostile to Christians, and so you're just going to be out of your depth. We don't know. The goal of gathering information is to get a sense of where to go next. Now, it's not my conviction that every conversation is like a divine appointment. I do not think that's true. I think sometimes we're just ships passing in the night. And so I'm just going to stay alert. I'm not trying to, as I mentioned earlier, feel led by the Spirit. I'm just going to stay alert for opportunities that God gives me, okay? And if I have an opportunity, I'm going to take the next step. I'll tell you one other thing about this first step, is that it's a very low commitment level. I was in Paraguay in July, and I was flying back, and it was the middle of the night. I landed in Asuncion, which is in Brazil. No, is that right? No, I went in, that's in Paraguay. I was in Sao Paulo in Brazil, and it's the middle of the night. the airport's almost empty, and I'm hungry, and there's a little restaurant there, but I don't know if I can eat the food and drink the water. And I see a young man, very nice and clean cut, sitting at the table, talking in Portuguese with the waitress. He looks American to me, but he's speaking Portuguese. Oh, cool. So I ask him if I can eat the food and drink the water. Seems like he knows his way around. Okay, now keep in mind, he's a young man, very nice looking and clean cut, who speaks Portuguese in Brazil. Take a guess. LDS. He's a missionary, actually a former missionary, but I didn't know this, okay? Remember, it's the middle of the night. I'm weary. I just spent 11 days or 12 days speaking almost every single day all over. And I'm worn out. I'm on my way home. Do I want to talk about Jesus? No, I don't want to talk about Jesus. I don't want to talk to any LDS person, especially. Though they're really nice, but I didn't want to get into a big thing. And so I'm sitting at the table with him because I decided, I said, I'll buy you dinner because, you know, he'd help me out, whatever, and I was just going to be nice to him. But I thought to myself, gee, now I got to share Christ with him. This is kind of what my thinking was, and I wasn't in the mood. And I thought, no, you don't. All you have to do is what? Gather information. Just gather information. So notice, I mean, I'm dealing with my own resistance to these kinds of things. I'm just being very transparent with you on this. And, but I realize since I have a game plan, I can initiate my game plan without committing myself to doing anything more. So if I just ask questions to gather information, it may turn out, that step being a simple one, it may turn out that there's another step that presents itself that is also a simple one, and I could just take another simple step, or maybe another simple step. Or if it turns out, once I've taken a step or two, that the conversation, spiritually speaking, dies a natural death, that's all right too. Now, as it turned out, he had to catch his flight. So I didn't get very far into the conversation. What I did ask him is, why is he LDS? Is he LDS because he was raised that way, or is he LDS because he really thinks it's true? Now, that's a good piece of information to get just to find out. And if it turns out that he said, well, I was raised that way, then I would ask him another question. Is that a good reason to adopt an entire religious viewpoint, just that you were raised that way? You know, maybe that's, I don't know what he'd say. I don't think it's a good reason. But who knows? I just want to get him thinking. And if it turned out, maybe I could ask, if it turned out that, you know, that Mormonism wasn't actually true, do you think you have the freedom intellectually to pursue another option? I just want to know. By the way, how much have I said in this faux conversation so far that I've offered? How much have I said about Christianity? None. How much have I preached the gospel? None. What am I doing? I'm just taking baby steps and seeing where it goes. Now, it turns out he didn't go far because he had to leave, but that's where I might have gone, being relaxed. And in the process, maybe setting up a way of thinking in his mind that will make him open to hearing an alternative. And if he's not open, then I'm asking, why wouldn't you be open? Well, we don't allow that kind of thing in Mormonism, which is true. Well, why wouldn't you allow that? And then if he starts doubting or questioning that whole scene, that now makes him more open next time around for the next gardener that comes into his life. Are you getting a picture of the kind of thing I'm talking about? I'm putting it this way because I want you to realize that that first step is not hard. You are not committing yourself to a long thing. You're just taking a step. And then maybe another step. And then see where it goes. And I'm giving you an example from my own life about how that works. So this is the first stage of the game plan. You gather information. That's all we're doing. Okay, when we're gathering information, this other person may be giving their point of view. And once they give their point of view, maybe contrary to Christianity, or they offer a challenge against Christianity, we want clarification of the challenge. And I gave you some examples of that as well. Okay? But now we have another step. Now we are clear on what their point of view is. And incidentally, this is the first step of all critical thinking. You want to critically assess a point of view, you've got to be clear on what that point of view is. That's the very first step. You got to figure it out. Now, some of you had training, maybe homeschoolers, you understand that in logic, if somebody misunderstands a view or misrepresents the view and knocks that misrepresentation over, that's a problem. What's it called? Anybody know? Straw man, there you go. Homeschooled? Bada boom. Okay. Made Dad proud there. Okay. It's a straw man. Straw man is bad thinking and it's bad manners. You don't want to refute a view somebody doesn't hold. Waste of time. Okay? You want to be clear you understand. So if you're asking more detail about their view, it's less likely that you're going to misunderstand it. So the witch in Wisconsin, I said, let me see if I understand your view. If I had a 2-year-old that was conceived by incest, I should be allowed to kill it. Did I get that right? So I'm checking it out. I'm also trying to exploit a weakness or a flaw, which is Columbo number 3. I'll get to that in just a bit, briefly. But the idea is I want to make sure I get her view right, okay? First step of critical thinking. Now I got a good picture of what the view is. Now, second step. I want to reverse the burden of proof. I want to reverse the burden of proof. And what I mean by burden of proof is the responsibility, burden, someone in the discussion has to give reasons, proof, for a point of view. So burden of proof is the responsibility someone has to give reasons for a point of view. Okay, that's what that is. Now, who bears the responsibility in any conversation? Here's the answer. The person who makes the claim bears the burden. The person who makes the claim bears the burden of proof. So if you make a claim about something, especially if it's controversial, then you are responsible for giving reasons to support the claim. It is not the other person's responsibility, the Christian in this case, to refute your view. The person who makes the claim bears the burden. So if the DA comes up to you and knocks on your door, and you answer the door, and the DA says, "You robbed the bank," you get to say to the DA what? Prove it. Right, because the burden of proof is on the accuser in American jurisprudence and standard. Burden of proof is on the person who makes the claim. By the way, I was teaching this in a really big church in Southern California. There were 1,000 people in each service. There were 3 services, bang, bang, bang. And I'm teaching in Columbo. And I got to this point, and I said, you know, when the guy knocks at your door and says, "You robbed the church," what do you get to say? And somebody in the back says, "What?" I'm sorry, you robbed the bank. Did I say church earlier? Did I? Okay, let me start over. I don't even remember where I was. If the DA says, "You robbed the bank," did I say rob the church? No, I said I got it right the first time. Okay. When I said that to the audience, I said, you get to say to the DA, and then somebody said, What bank? Like that, you know, out of nowhere. What bank did you rob? That is actually a really funny line if I don't completely butcher it like I did. So we're gonna move on from that. In this situation, and in most situations, certainly at this stage in the use of our game plan, it is the other person who's making the claim against Christianity or in favor of his own view. When they make a claim like that, they bear the burden of proof. Now, the impulse of a lot of Christians, especially more aggressive ones, is to take the responsibility on themselves to disprove the other person's side, instead of letting them give reasons for their own view. And that means we're giving them a free ride. And so the rule at this point is no more free rides, okay? We are not going to let them have a free ride by taking the responsibility on our own shoulders to disprove them. First, we're going to ask of them to give their reasons, basically. So they've thrown the gauntlet down, right, with their challenge. What's a gauntlet, by the way? Who knows what that is? It's a glove. It's a medieval glove. So this is a challenge by a knight. When the knight throws the gauntlet down, he doesn't say, "I win." No, you just got in the game. Now you got to put up or shut up, right? Now you got to show us what you got. You got to get it and fight. And by the same token, when somebody throws the gauntlet down, it is now their job to defend their view. 60s alert. In the immortal words of Ricky Ricardo, they got a lot of splaining to do, okay? So we want to have them do the splaining, right? And we don't want to let them off the hook. I know you're thinking, who is Ricky Ricardo? Lucy, you cannot be on the show, that guy. Okay, so So we are not going to let them off the hook. And I want to tell you about a conversation that I had on the radio, KFI, which is a secular station, 60,000 watt station in Los Angeles area. And it was pretty interesting because I was on in the evening talking about intelligent design and creation, and they opened the lines up, and people were calling in. And so somebody called in and invoked Big Bang cosmology against my view as an intelligent design creationist. Now, I know there's some controversy about this in Christian circles, but I'm not troubled by the Big Bang at all, and I have good reason to believe it actually took place. But keep in mind that the Big Bang is the same as the creation moment in my view, and it's as evidence for a creator because, I mean, to put simply, a Big Bang needs a Big Banger, right? This must not be a Big Bang audience, though, so nobody thought that was very funny. But in any event, even if you don't believe in it, you can, for the sake of argument, kind of go along with a secularist who holds this view. So you have an effect that needs an appropriate cause. That's what I'm arguing here. And that was the point that I made with this caller. And he says, well, I don't think it is. He's going to tell me how you could get something from nothing. Okay, that's how a Big Bang doesn't need a Big Banger, basically. Here's what he said. Well, I don't think it is because you could start with a base of nothing, and you could say that there was nothing but an infinite continuous moment, and eventually one tiny little insignificant thing happened. A point happened in the nothingness. Well, that's the problem, isn't it? How do you get a point in the nothingness? I guess if it's a really small point, it's easier. I don't know. Then he goes on, he says, the point expanded, which is extremely simple, requires no intelligence, so no intelligent God had to intervene. All we need is a little tiny imperfection in the perfect nothingness. By the way, let me pause for a moment. When you have conversations with people about things like this, about the universe coming from nothing, they always treat nothing like it's something. By the way, nothing is no thing. So if you have no thing, you cannot have an adjective that describes it because there's nothing to adjectivize. So you can't have a perfect no thing. You can't have a tiny no thing. You can't have an anyway. He continues, and that imperfection expanded, became variegated, increasingly complex, and soon you had galaxies and planets kind of spitting out of this thing. So basically you start with no thing, which is like a calm pool, and then a speck of something comes from somewhere, he didn't say, drops into this calm pool of no thing, and then it creates all this other stuff. So I'm thinking, I got to answer this guy, and I'm thinking, I'm in LA, he's on drugs. But I pointed out to him, I said, it's interesting how you started. I said, you started by saying you could say that, and then you spun your tail. I said, you're right. You can say anything you want. But giving us good reason to take what you said seriously, that's another matter. And you haven't done any of that, so I don't have to answer your fairy tale, essentially is what I told him, okay? This is the point I'm making. People can spin all kinds of yarns. You're going to be alerted to it when they say something like, I can explain that. Oh, I can explain that. Boom, 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 boom. And then they give their accounting of how they think it happened or took place. Fine. A lot of times you start with an accounting like that is speculative, and you work, that's the way science works. You work from the speculation, and you see if you have good evidence. But you don't stop there. And this is what a lot of people do. Well, I can explain that, okay? The Da Vinci Code is a great example. Well, I can explain why people thought Jesus was the Son of God. You see at the Council of Nicaea, blah, 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 and they made Jesus into the Son of God, who was a divine people, and before that they didn't believe in that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so there's Dan Brown's story. It's not enough to tell a story. That's the point here. You have to give reasons for your story. You have to be able to say, this is why I think my story is true. So the model question at this point is going to be some form of the question, how did you come to that conclusion? Or what are your reasons for that? Now, there are lots of variations for this. Just like with the first question, what do you mean by that? You're getting clarification on their view, and once you're clear on their view, now you're trying to figure out why they would believe their own view or why you should believe their own view, and you're waiting to see if they have anything to say. And this is another point when you ask, how did you come to that conclusion? What are your reasons for that? Well, you may get a Simon and Garfunkel moment, okay? Sounds of silence. Why? Because they don't have reasons for their view. In this case, they are much like many Christians who have strong opinions but no reasons for their opinions. And these Christians are vulnerable. This is why we have apologetic conferences like this one. The same thing is true of the non-Christian. They're repeating things that they said. They haven't thought through them. And so when you ask them for the reasons, you get dead air. I had one time a person said, after he thought about it for a few moments, he said, I guess I don't have any reasons for my view. I said, well, I got another question for you. He said, what's that? He said, why would you believe something you have no reasons to believe? He thought about it for a second. He said, well, I don't have a reason for that either. It's entirely legitimate for you to ask for an accounting from others regarding their view. This is what they're asking of us all the time. Why don't we ask it of them as well? In a kind fashion, a gracious fashion. Okay, let's hear it. What is your rationale for the view? Now, what I've done so far is I've given you 2 steps of the game plan. The first one is gathering information with a question, what do you mean by that? The second one is a different kind of information, the rationale or the reasons. You're going to reverse the burden of proof onto the shoulders of the person on whom it belonged, the person who made the claim, and ask for a rationale, their justification, their reasons for their view. Now, I want to make an observation at this point. Notice how easy both of those steps are. You are not advancing anything on your side yet. Because you're not advancing your view, you're not preaching, you're not declaring anything to be so, you have no liability. If you are not making a claim, you are not bearing any burden. You are in complete safety at this particular point. If a person asks you, well, what's your view? You're free to tell them if you want, or you might just say, you know, at this point I'm not interested in talking about that. I just want to learn more about your point of view, okay? That is, you don't have to go any deeper into the pool than you feel comfortable going at any given point. But you can still, as long as you're in the pool, so to speak, make a difference. And I've seen it time and time again. I was in, what's the state, Ohio? Indiana, is that a state? Okay. I was in Indiana. Maybe it was Illinois. That is a state, because I was born in Illinois, I think. And I was talking to somebody at an event like this who was a professor in the local junior college. He was a biologist. And he said, you know what, I used to talk to my students about evolution and try to critique evolution with them because he's a creationist or intelligent design person, you know. And he said, you know, I'd go back and forth. But then I read your tactics book, and I thought, well, maybe I'll try that out, see if it works, instead of preaching. So I sat down with a student at lunch, and I asked the student a question who believed in evolution, the Darwinian model, the macroevolution, the neo-Darwinian synthesis. He said, how did life begin? This is the question of the student. He said, how did life begin? Now, this is what do you mean by that kind of question? Help me to understand your view on this. Because in order to get Darwinian evolution, you got to have a kickoff, and that's the beginning of life. You have no life, then you have life. How did that happen right there? Now, this is a huge problem for Darwinists. Just saying, if you study this, you know what I'm talking about. If you do any biology, you know this is huge, okay? So here's what the student said. He said, well, okay, let me explain it to you. You got a piece of paper. Now, the professor is telling me this story. He got a piece of paper, and he said, he starts mapping it out. The student is for the professor who asked him to explain this to him. And he gets a little way into his explanation, and the student pauses, and he looks at what he wrote, and then he says, well, this is actually better evidence for intelligent design. Let me try something else. So he got another piece of paper out, started writing another thing, and then he paused a second time. He said, this is actually better evidence for intelligent design too. Now, what did the biology professor do? He hadn't done anything. He just asked for clarification. Now, he is loaded to the gills with capability of answering the challenges, and he'd been doing that, but it hadn't been making much progress. Instead, he just goes and asks for a simple question of clarification. And he's telling me the story. He dragged me off from an event like this. Hey, let me tell you my story. This shows how powerful this technique can be. How much impact you can have just with a couple of simple steps. So you might just be thinking now, I suggested that maybe take a month or two, just get into the shallow end of the pool and ask questions about people's view. Now you might add to that, asking them questions about the reasons for their view. Become an expert in the other person's point of view. Don't take any risk on yourself, okay? Like I said, you don't have to swing for the fences. You don't have to get on base. Just get in the batter's box. If you haven't noticed, I just want to point out that I've already fulfilled my promise to you. I promised that I would give you a game plan that will allow you to converse with confidence, no matter how little you knew, or how knowledgeable or aggressive or obnoxious the other person happens to be. And now I've given you that game plan. You can converse with anybody. If you ask them, what do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? It's easy. It's easy. Okay? But there's more. And there's the third step of the game plan. Now, the first two steps are easy because they require gathering information of a particular type, and there are model questions that go with it. The third step is more advanced. The third step is using questions to make a point. Using questions to make a point. Now, what kind of point might you want to make? There are two categories. Let me just pause for a second because I'm jumping over something that I think I want to talk about before I get to the third point. So hold that right there. It occurs to me that there is a liability that you could get into that has to do with burden of proof, and I call this the professor's ploy. And the professor's ploy is when the professor of a classroom, and it probably doesn't happen here, but it does happen in some Christian schools, but especially in secular universities, where it is the professor's goal to destroy the spiritual confidence of every Christian that comes into the classroom. And so I have had students tell me that the first day of class, the professor asked for a show of hands of how many students were Christians in that room, and then he said, "You will not be Christians when I get done with you." And then takes every opportunity that they can to go after Christianity, even when it's not the topic of discussion, all right? And say things like, well, the Bible's just a bunch of fables and blah, blah, blah. Now, there's often going to be a student that's Christian in the class who's not going to take this lying down and is going to raise his hand and then go after the professor head-to-head in a discussion in the middle of the class session, okay? I think this is right-hearted, I get it, but I think it's wrong-headed. And the reason it's wrong-headed is because it violates a basic view of engagement, a basic rule of engagement. And that rule is this: you never make a frontal assault on a superior force in an entrenched position. This is, shall we say, dumb. The man with the microphone is going to win. That's the way it works, okay? You're at a huge disadvantage when you try to do something like, I wouldn't even do that kind of thing. Now, I'm not saying you break off the conversation. I'm saying this is a good time to use your tactics, okay? So if the professor's saying this kind of stuff, well, the Bible's just a bunch of fables, blah, 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 and I don't know, if you're a student in the class, what question might pop into your head that you could raise your hand and ask right now? What question might, what do you mean by that? Thank you. Yeah, what do you mean by that? Now, is this the kind of question a student is usually asking? Right, it's totally appropriate. Is this a head-to-head struggle? No. So he might answer and clarify. I don't know, then what second question might pop into your head that you could ask him at this point? How did you come to that conclusion? Right. Now, at this point, the professor might figure out what's going on. He realizes, well, you're the Christian who's sandbagging, you know, and doing this number, and he's going to call you out. And he might say something like this: well, you must be one of those Christians who thinks the Bible's the Word of God, every jot and tittle. Okay, I've got a couple extra minutes. Why don't you stand up and explain to the rest of the class why you think the Bible is not a bunch of fables, but actually the Word of God. Go ahead. Okay, now what has the professor just done? He's reversed the burden of proof. And why is it illicit given this conversation? Because the Christian hasn't made any claims. The professor is the one making the claim. And now the professor is trying to push the burden of disproof, essentially, onto the Christian to do the heavy lifting. Okay? Don't take the bait. Don't ever take the bait when somebody else is trying to get you to disprove their view. I know Christians have done this. Crazy doctrine, somebody take an exception with this particular thing, and he threw the Bible down and he says, disprove me, like that. No, 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 no. That isn't how it works. If he's making the claim, he bears the burden. It is up to that person, that pastor in this particular case, to demonstrate that what he's teaching is solidly biblical. Okay? So this can happen on both sides of the fence. Don't take the bait. Now, in the case of the professor, you might say to the professor, well, professor, actually, you don't even know what I think because I never said it. As far as I know, I could agree with you. I'm just trying to learn here. I'm just trying to figure out what you believe and why you believe it, unless you want everybody to just take everything on faith. No, don't say that. I'm just joking about that. So that gives you an idea a little bit of how this burden of proof gets shifted in a conversation, okay? I also want to give you one other thing before we go on to the third step. And this is a technique that I call getting out of the hot seat. Now, the hot seat, the way I'm using the term, is a place you find yourself in when you're more in persuasion mode and making your case, but the other person is coming back with challenges that you can't respond to. And maybe you got blindsided a little bit. You didn't realize this person was a professor of Old Testament history at some secular university. And bang, 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 bang. You're getting all of these things that you don't know how to deal with. You're totally out of your depth, and you're feeling overwhelmed. And you're looking for the door, you know, and you're thinking, boy, I wish I wouldn't have opened my big fat mouth because look at all the trouble I got myself into. Okay, so that's the hot seat, right? So I want to tell you a way to reverse the circumstances, actually fairly simply, okay, when you get into a situation like this where you feel you're out of your depth. And what we're going to use is a little bit of like conversational Aikido. Aikido is that self-defense where you use the other person's energy against them. So essentially you're going to say, okay, come on down. You're not going to push back. You're going to say, come on down. And here's what you're going to say to them. You're going to say something like this. Wow, it sounds to me like you know a lot more about this than I do because I can't begin to deal with some of these issues. I wonder if you could do me a favor and help me out. Okay, so this is your transition. By the way, when you're being overwhelmed like that, who is in the driver's seat of the conversation? You or the other person? The other person is, right? Okay, so you're going to reverse that. You're going to say, I wonder if you can slow down. I don't know the answers to this. This is new to me, but I'd like to understand you. So I wonder if I want to take some notes, and I just, or at least make a mental note. Can you just clearly state for me what your view is, and then give me your reasons for it? Okay? State what your view is, and give me your reasons for it. Now, you can form this in any way that you want that's convenient. But basically, these are our first two Columbo questions, right? That's all we're doing. We're applying them in a different circumstance in a kind of defensive maneuver. So when they're coming on strong and we can't handle this, we're not going to get flustered. We're not going to get upset. We're just going to ask them to slow down and explain their view because we're out of our depth. And then we tell them, let me think about it. Let me think about it. Now, them's the magic words. Because when you say, and let me think about it, do you have any further obligation to answer the challenges? No, you're totally off the hook. You've already said, I'm the dummy, you're the smart guy, please help me to get it and understand it. Give me the details. And then I'll chew on it later. And later's the key here. What do you do next? You do what you said. On your own, at your leisure, when the pressure's off. You consider what's been said. Then you can consult some resource material or call me in my office hours. I'll help you out. That would be Tuesday from 4 to 6 LA times. You can call. I don't remember what that number is, but when I'm on the air, I'll tell you because it's the radio show. So I have people call me all the time to ask questions like that. So you can do that too. The point here is that when you do that, When you say, can you explain your view and let me think about it, now who is in the driver's seat? You or the other person? You are. You're managing that. The pressure's off. Basically what you're saying to the other person who's really aggressive is, so you want to beat me up? Okay. Just do it slowly and thoroughly, please. Now let me ask you, is there anybody here, even the most shy, retiring, bashful, timid, and that can't do this, that can't say, oh, you want to beat me up? Okay, just do it slowly and thoroughly, please. Anybody can do this. And what you're going to get is an education in the process. And next time around, if you think about it, next time around, you're going to have some understanding about how to deal with this because you've done some of your own research and maybe you've worked a little bit on some Columbo questions that will help you with this, okay? So that's the professor's ploy and getting out of the hot seat, okay? We're still, in that case, working with the first two uses of Columbo. Our third step, I mentioned already, is to gather information. There are two types of information that you may be, I'm sorry, let me back up. The third step in Columbo is to use your questions to make a point. And there are two types of points that you might like to be making. One of them is you might be making the point of your own view. That is, you want them to understand your own view, but you're going to use questions to accomplish that. Let me give you one example of that. On the radio show, I had a young man. This is actually, the same kind of thing has happened a couple different times. In the book, I give an illustration from a gal that I met on a train in France, but it was the same situation. The young man called me on the radio show, told me that he was a new Christian, which I said, hey, great, welcome to the family. And but he doesn't understand why he has to tell other people about Jesus. He has two roommates, they're not Christians, and apparently they've been giving him some pushback, and he doesn't understand why he's got to mess with that and create trouble. So why do I need to tell other people about Christianity? So now I'm going to make my point. I want to give him an answer, but I am going to use my questions to get there and really help him in a process of self-discovery because it's going to be more effective when I do it that way. And so I asked him, I said, tell me, why did you become a Christian? Just for clarification. Now that's a, what do you mean by that question? I want more information. Why did you become a Christian? He said, well, I became a Christian because I wanted to get my sins forgiven. I said, well, that's a good reason. I said, what would have happened if you hadn't become a Christian? Well, then I wouldn't get my sins forgiven, and then I would be, I'd experience God's judgment. Okay, that's both good answers. But I stopped there, and I didn't say anything, because I wanted his own words to sink in on him. And I just gave it a couple of beats. You don't want to have too much dead air on the radio, but I just gave it a couple of beats, and then I heard him say on the other side, oh, like that. Oh, so if I didn't become a Christian, then I wouldn't receive forgiveness for my sins. So if my friends don't become Christians, then they won't receive forgiveness for their sins. No duh, right? But he hadn't connected the dots, that's all. He was a young guy, just brand new. And all I was doing, I figured he knew the answer to this, but I was going to use the questions to lead him a little bit in that process of self-discovery so he realized himself the reason why talking with others about Christ was so important. Okay, so there's one example of using questions to make a point. That would be the kind of point, whatever your view happens to be. But a lot of times you're going to be using questions to refute another view or to exploit a weakness or a flaw in somebody's view. Okay? A lot of the other tactics that I mentioned are tactics that will help you to find the flaw and give you examples in the book, conversations I've had where I've used that tactic with Columbo, number 3, to exploit a weakness or a flaw. In the conversation with the witch in Wisconsin, I was doing just that. I was using what's called taking the roof off tactic. That is, I was taking her point of view, that is, it's okay to kill babies who are conceived through incest. I was taking that point of view and I was accepting it for the sake of discussion, and I was giving it a test drive, making an application to a clear case counterexample. So it became clear if I was applying her view the way she suggests, I end up with a ridiculous result. So I'm removing the protection that she has with her own view, and I'm letting, in a sense, the cold wind blow so she can see where her view leads her. But notice I did that by using questions. So in this case, this is also called a reductio ad absurdum, or just simply reductio. I am showing her the ridiculous or absurd consequences of the view that she holds by using questions to get her to question her own view. Okay? Now, I mentioned a little bit earlier that there's another element here that when you're using questions to exploit a view, you can oftentimes get the other person to cooperate with you, even though they disagree with you. So let me talk about that for a moment. One of the reasons that the third use of Columbo is advanced is because you need to know where you want to go with it. And if you want to exploit a weakness or a flaw, you're going to have to know what the weakness or the flaw was. You're going to have to catch that. That's why this is a little more advanced technique. That's like the target you're shooting for, and your questions are going to be like arrows shooting at that target. Okay? However, when you notice a flaw or you want to make a particular point, sometimes there are multiple steps to get to that point. Okay? And you need to put the pieces on the table as you're explaining your view to get to the point that you want to make. The problem is when you're in conversations with people, and I'll give you an example of this in a moment. When you're in your conversations with people and you're making your case, especially if they tend to be a little bit belligerent, they're not going to let you get very far because you put one piece on the table and they're going to take exception with that. They're not going to want to give any ground whatsoever. You try to get the second piece on the table, they're going to take exception with that too. So you're fighting for every step. That's a lot of work. You're not making progress with that person, okay? The alternative is to use your Columbo tactic to enlist them as an ally to help you make your case. And so to get these pieces in position, especially if they turn out to be reasonably common sense pieces, you're going to ask questions of the other person to get that person to put the pieces on the table for you. Okay? Now, this is a little abstract at this point. I'll give you an illustration in a moment, but I just want to tell you, I do this all the time, and it really works nicely. If you know where you want to go, if you have an issue worked out, if they offer a challenge and you know the answer to it, this is where knowledge comes in. If you don't know, you can't go there. But the more you study, the more you read, you listen to podcasts, blah, 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 conferences, you're going to see the flaws. Now you want to think strategically, tactically, how you maneuver to get there. Okay, so here's my illustration. I was in a conference and during the Q&A, and I was challenged with a question. And the question, actually it wasn't a question, it was a request. The challenger said, "Prove to me God exists." Now, this is actually, as stated, a difficult thing to respond to. And the reason it's difficult, and I shared this with the questioner, the challenger, is because you said, "Prove." I don't know, I told him, what would count as proof to you. And by the way, if anybody ever says, "Prove it," or "Prove to me," or whatever, regarding a spiritual thing, and you don't resolve this issue, you're dead. You're a dead duck. And the reason is you can give explanations all day long, and at the end of the day, they can just simply say, "That's not what? It's not proof." They're not going to be satisfied. So you have to offer some, request some clarification first. So I mentioned that to him. That's one problem, I said. The second thing is, you said, "Prove to me." So now I've got to deal with your psychological state of affairs. I don't know what's going to be persuasive to you. I don't know why you're resisting whatever. So here's my request, I said to him. I said, "Could you reword the challenge so that I can kind of bypass these built-in difficulties and answer really what you're after?" And so he thought about it for a moment, and he said, "Okay, can you give me any good reason to believe in God?" Well, that's much better. Okay, maybe good is a little wiggle word, but I think I could do that. So I said, "Sure." I said, "Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions first?" So if I'm ever talking to you, and I say, "Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions?" Duck, all right? He said, "No, go ahead." I said, "The first couple are pretty basic, but it'll lay the stage here, okay? Do you think that things exist?" Pretty simple. Yeah, he said, okay. I actually, when I did this at University of Toronto, there was an atheist at the microphone, and he didn't want to go anywhere with me on this, you know. And so, and now I'm asking him the question. Notice I'm not trying to put the thing on the table because I know he's going to beat me up on it. So I'm going to let him put it on the table, right? But he didn't want to go there. And finally, he's back and forth like this, and finally he says, okay, this microphone exists. I said, all right, I can work with that. Okay, so things exist. I agree with you. So we both agree at this point on this particular issue, okay? Secondly, the things that exist, I asked, have they always existed? Which is just another way of asking, is the universe eternal? And of course, his answer was, no, they haven't always existed. They came into being at some point in the distant past. How far in the past is a matter of debate, but some point in the past, everything came into existence. Let's just call it, for fun, the Big Bang, okay? And because that was certainly their conviction, okay? So, okay, yeah, we have the beginning of all these things, all right? Great, I agree with you. I think everything came into existence too. We both agree on the first two things. I got two pieces on the table, and he put them there, okay? Here's the third question, and this is the one that matters. What caused everything to come into existence? Or you might put it, what banged the Big Bang? Now, I said, to make it easier on you, you have only two alternatives. Either something or no thing. What say you? This is the critical question. Because notice the way I've constructed the question, something or no thing, all possibilities are there captured in the two, okay? It can't be both and it can't be neither because there's rules of logic that apply to that. There's no middle place, that's the law of excluded middle, in the way I put the question. What's he going to say? Now, he doesn't want to say something caused it, because the something that caused the universe, especially to a materialist who believes the universe is all there is, that something that caused the universe would have to be outside of the universe. That means materialism would be false as a worldview. And if there's something that caused everything else, that something would have to be pretty intelligent, pretty powerful, outside of the time-space continuum, non-physical, and, did I say smart? Really smart, and personal, by the way. In other words, it would have to be an individual, because only persons can initiate a series of events. There's got to be a decision to act, okay? He didn't want to say that because that sounds too much like what? God. Right. It does sound like God. He doesn't want to go there. He's an atheist. But what's his only other alternative? If he doesn't acknowledge the common sense option that something caused everything else, he's going to have to say that no thing caused it. The universe popped into existence out of nothing for no reason and from no cause. Now, people can argue whether that's possible or not. I don't think it's possible. But even if it's possible, it ain't the odds-on favorite. It is not the reasonable option. Now, Daniel Dennett, one of the new atheists, coined the term brights to describe atheists like himself. We're the smart guys. You dim bulbs out there believe in God. Forget about you. We're the smart guys. We're the brights. Okay, Mr. Bright, which option is brighter? Everything came from something, or everything came from no thing? And just to put a sharper point on it, which one is the odds-on favorite? Ladies, if any of you wives came home from work or wherever and saw in the garage a brand new Mercedes SL that wasn't there the day before, you said, honey, what? Where did that new Mercedes SL come from? It just popped into existence out of nothing, honey. That's the way scientists said the universe came to be, so I don't know why it can't happen to a Mercedes SL. But it's got your name on the license plate. Oh, that happened by accident too. You get the design argument in there at the same time as the cosmological argument. Ladies, which one of you are going to buy that? It ain't going to work. Because even if it's possible, it ain't the odds-on favorite. So notice what I've done is I have in my mind an argument for God's existence. It is called the cosmological argument. It's a type of argument. The particular variety of cosmological that I offered is called the Columbo cosmological argument. You don't need to remember all of that. All you need to remember is a Big Bang needs a Big Banger. I mean, that pretty much sums it up. But I knew the answer. I knew a way of giving a reasonable evidence for the existence of God. So I'm going to make that point by using questions. And I'm going to enlist my friend as an ally by asking a number of questions that set the stage now for me to, in a certain sense, lower the boom with the final conclusion. Now, I gave you a simple example of that, but there's lots and lots and lots of ways to do this when you get in the habit of doing it. Now, there's a whole lot more I could say. I'm just looking at, I'm in 50 minutes, we're just about finished. And also the basic rule is that the speaker should leave before the audience does. So I want to be mindful of that. I know, I hope that what I've offered today in chapel and in the 2 sessions we've had, maybe some of the things for the Q&A, is going to serve you well as an ambassador for Christ. I hope you remember that if you don't do it, what? It don't work. That's right. If you don't do it, it don't work. But if you do start doing it and just get into the shallow end of the pool, I promise you, you will see results that you never imagined was possible. Even from yourself. Man, I can't do this kind of thing. I'm too timid. I don't know the answers. That's all right. This is designed just for you. It's perfect for you. You could start doing a little bit here, a little bit there. You learn to garden better through the process of gardening, and then watch what God does. I hope you get the book. It's going to give you a whole lot more. But even if you don't, pay attention to the notes you took today and start putting what you have into play, and you will see dramatic results. I promise you. Let me pray for you as we close. Dear Father, thank you for the trust that the school has given me to be able to speak in this way with the students, provide some tools that will help them be more effective ambassadors for you, proclaiming your kingdom in a variety of ways. I pray, Father, that you will help them to take the things we talked about and employ them into their lives, and that by your Spirit, you will quickly show them fruit. And Father, I pray that the fruit will remain as a result of what you do through them for Christ's sake. Amen. Thank you.
Well, I'm so thankful for Greg's ministry and have been a beneficiary of his work throughout the years. And thank you for investing in us today. So let's thank him one more time.
Thank you.
Greg, I don't know if you want to make your way back to the book area, and we
Yeah,
can let people come.
I'll go
okay.
up there. Right.
I want to say just a couple things as we close. For those of you who are from off campus, thank you so much for being with us today. I hope that you found everything okay. It's a real treat for us to have you with us. Please let us know if we could serve you in any way. If you want to know more about the Center for Biblical Apologetics, we do monthly seminars, as I mentioned earlier. If you just go to cedarville.edu/apologetics, that will take you to our center website, and you'll see we'll have a couple more evening seminars. You're welcome to those. We always have community members join us for that. If you're in town and you want to come on Friday mornings, we call it Mere Caffeination, play off of C.S. Lewis's title, Mere Christianity, of course. Every Friday at 8 a.m. in our coffee shop, I just hang out with whoever wants to show up. We talk about what's going on in the world of worldview, and we'd love to have you be a part of that too. Thanks for being with us today. Please stop by and see Greg. Pick up a couple books before you head out. Have a wonderful day. God bless.